Importing. It was a thing once. Tiny Toons Adventures. This was a big cartoon when I was growing up. It was based on the relatives of the Looney Tunes cast and a few of us going to a Looniversity. I really enjoyed this game when I was a child, but I played it on the easy mode, which was dubbed children mode. Obviously, being a child, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Obviously now I've grown up a bit and I've realised that putting on children mode actually takes out over half of the content. So I've come back to revisit it and see what I'm missing. So the first level opens up, and the plot is that the school has been overrun by animals. This is ironic, considering the fact that most of the students who use the school are in fact also animals, apparently. Now, entering the game, we get our first chance to test the controls. You can walk, jump quite high, I mean he is a bunny after all, do some very strange dropkick on enemies that actually repels you backwards on impact, and run. There's a bar which slowly fills up to determine how far you can run, and you can also slide or dive by holding down during a run. You also collect stars for extra lives and carrots for health. Hollowed out carrots give you an extra bar of energy, but it isn't filled up. You also have the ability to run up walls, and in fact it's required to get through every single stage. I quite like this approach. I mean, I'm only a couple of screens in and I already know just about what all the controls are and what all the items do. It's quite refreshing because now they can just get on with the gameplay. The only thing that's a little bit annoying is that you get quite a few leaps of faith in this game, but they introduce it early and they give you lots of prompts to let you know when it's coming up. So the first stage has a mini-boss, Arnold the Pitbull. He basically runs about the place charging at you because you've broken into his art gallery and smashed up one of his statues. Just jump kick at his chest a few times, sooner or later he'll drop the key and you can leave. It's your basic platformer, there's nothing new to explain after this, and eventually you come up to the first boss. So, upon reaching the first boss, you're told by your good friend Hampton that Dizzy is destroying the kitchen, and soon the food will run out and the students will starve. What's his solution? Why, feed the crap out of him, causing him to rage and attack the kitchen more ferociously until all the food runs out and the students starve. 5 stars. A+. 4 stars. I mean seriously, the point is to stop him from eating the food by feeding him. It makes no sense, and what's more, this fight goes on for a ridiculous time. It's not even hard, but most of the time you'll end up wondering if you're actually doing anything. But no, eventually you do manage to fill him up, and Hampton comes in to complain that he's realised just what a stupid plan it was to begin with. Upon clearing each level, you're given a bonus round in which you spin this big Wheel of Fortune style disc, and on each square there's a different character's face. And the character you get determines which bonus you get, ranging some from that are very easy to some that are very hard, and they all give you the opportunity to get bonus lives. The second stage is set in the Wild West. Now, before you begin, you're given a prompt to ask if you're using the dash ability yet. Well, yeah, you can't get through the first stage without it, so I'm not sure why they felt the need to ask that. You open up by climbing over barrels, avoiding dogs, and a series of clones throwing tomatoes out of windows. Because, you know, tomatoes. Deadly from that distance. Now, at this point, the screen locks to a skipping rope segment, where you have to jump 10 times to be able to move on. If you fall over, you take damage and die. Now this really bothers me because this is possibly the stupidest way you can die in a game ever. How many people out there can say they actually suffered damage or died in a game because they couldn't jump over a skipping rope? I mean, can you even imagine how stupid that'd look in real life? See what I mean? Absolutely ridiculous. Makes no sense. So after that's over, you walk past the horse enclosure, and then you go through a bar which has a lot of free-falling barrels. You then bump into Max. After chasing him out the window, the boss sequence begins for this stage. Now, this sequence isn't available on the easy mode of the game, or the children mode, so I never got to see any of this growing up. This is a whole new section for me. Did I mention I really dislike auto-scrollers? If anything, they slow the game down and pull you out of any immersion you already had. Because all of a sudden, there's a restriction and a set of rules on where you can and can't go. In this case, why does the screen move so slowly, yet the train is going incredibly quickly? It doesn't make any sense at all. At least there's lots of obstacles to avoid, ranging from nets, to tunnels, to general enemies, to even sections where the train starts to dismantle itself mid-air, causing you to have to jump from carriage to carriage. After getting back on the ground and killing a couple of enemies and a very generic mid-boss, you've hit the checkpoint. However, all of a sudden you're at the front of the train, and yet the screen's still moving. However, there's nothing there that's driving it, so it begs the question, what's making this train move? Thankfully, you don't have very long to dwell on this, because a plank of wood just randomly appears out of mid-air, which you can jump on. Using these planks of wood, you eventually make your way to the front half of the train. So now you can forget about that past half that's now probably destroyed itself, and get on with the stage. So now that you're at the front of the train, the boss is still just an auto-scroller. It took me a few tries to work out what you have to do. Basically, you attack all the obstacles to destroy them, avoid the steam and the fire, grab the surprisingly cute one-up icon and finish the level. Before disappearing though, you and Max head off on a pushcart of some description. You have no control over this event and they have to outrun the train. Maybe they need to get to 88 miles an hour and travel back in time to get to the next level or something. Oh, well, I guess I called that then. The next level takes place in an old haunted mansion, so it kinda links in together surprisingly well with the time travel they had in the last stage. Really didn't see that one coming. The new element that's introduced in this area are a series of seesaws, that when you jump on one side, a ball gets thrown into the air and lands, causing you to fly up significantly higher than the laws of physics would normally allow. Now I just want to point out, this is something else that bothers me in quite a lot of games. If I'd pressed jump as the ball landed on the seesaw, and then I'd got propelled higher, it would make some form of sense. But you don't. In fact, pressing jump makes you actually go lower. So what's going on here? That aside, you do need to use the seesaws to get through the level. There's a one-up near the end of the first screen, and the only enemies you'll find are fake balls. In the last half of the levels, the seesaws are still there, but now they're being hit by very large hammers. This makes more sense because we don't know what's propelling the hammer, and it's very plausible that it could in fact send you flying. Although disappointingly, this area appears really open and has lots of platforms, but it is just a case of go left. There's nothing special to find, and eventually Babs will stop you and ask you to help her friend who's been brainwashed by a mad scientist. Now, this is another section that isn't available on easy. My first few tries consisted of me trying to drop kick the scent back into the boss. It didn't work though. Figures. It took me a few tries to work out that you have to damage the machine. It took me even longer to realise that you have to drop kick the screws to do so whilst avoiding the light bulbs. I've got to hand it to this game. None of these bosses are straightforward. You've got to do something different in each one to win, and you don't see that very often in a lot of games. After a lot of hits, peace is restored. On to the next level. Football. The idea is like in many sports movies of the 90s, it's the final, and our team is down by one arbitrary unit of scoring, and there's only one way to win. The most dramatic possible way of scoring. You start by running into the ball, and upon being hit you enter your first down. I have no idea what I'm talking about here, so I'll sum up what the game expects you to know. You have to make a decent amount of progress, otherwise you lose a down. Upon losing all 4 downs, you lose a life and have to start again. I don't understand why, as there's a pretty generous time limit at the top of the screen, despite Babs saying that the time had almost ran out only a minute ago. You're given 2 choices, run or pass. Running means you just get to run and jump over a lot of oncoming enemies. They will either run straight at you, jump a little bit, or jump a lot. It's a guessing game, pure and simple. Although you can jump at them and turn around to fake them out, as each opponent will only jump once. This is, however, very difficult. Passing lets you get a long head start with no obstacles, but you have to catch the ball in mid-air. Doing so resumes the game as a run, but with a lot of distance already covered, but it can be quite tricky to catch the ball. Eventually, you'll score a touchdown, win the game, and move on. Although, personally speaking, I'd recommend you skip this stage because there's just nothing there to do. Stage 5 is completely removed from the easy difficulty, but anyway, Calamity Coyote has lost an object in the sky and wants you to get it back. Yes, that's actually how vague he is as well. It's somewhere in the sky. Care to narrow it down a little bit? After the conversation, Buster actually asks him how did he hide it up so high, but then the game fades into the level. That's a legitimate question. How did he get it up so high? Unfortunately, this stage is basically a culmination of everything I dislike in a platformer. Having to wait a painfully long time for platforms to appear, auto-scrollers, and bubbles. Yes, I really do not like bubbles in platforms. If you grew up in the same era as me and played a lot of them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For a long time, it seemed that they were essential in any game, be it as a platform, an enemy, or an air supply. It's strangely unimaginative, and it's basically, hey, let's fill this screen up with circles. It's one of the few things I'm glad we don't see anymore in games, and I just get so annoyed because I know whenever I see a bubble in a game sold, it's not going to be fun. Unfortunately, there's nothing special in this level at all, but the second half does involve you riding a large blimp with the Tiny Toons logo. A bit of fourth wall, or perhaps self-indulgent. However, I'm pretty sure if I could afford it, I'd put my face on a blimp too. The boss is a giant pinball machine. Seriously. You have to get to the top of it to win. The first section, I actually don't know how you're supposed to clear it. I just ran up the wall to reach the top, where you have to collect a large number of balls to open the door and the exit. However, I'm pretty sure this isn't how you're supposed to do it. After doing all this, you drop kick a giant ball and finish the stage. Easy. The item in question is the script for the next episode of the show. So at this point, I need to question something. What's been going on? Is this real life or is it a show? If it is a show, then it's one of the most messed up plots we've ever seen. If it's real life, then their real life must consist of jumping on hot air balloons and bubbles in the sky, dismantling trains whilst they're still travelling, winning a football World Cup, and going through haunted mansions whilst starving students out of a school. It's a little bit messed up. I'm thinking way too deeply about this. Now you have another auto-scroller, which doesn't bother me as much as the other one. You have to run straight up to the top of the screen and collect all of the go-go statues on the way. If you fall once, you're out. If you miss a statue, you're out. The reason this doesn't bother me so much is because at least it moves quickly, and it does require quite a bit of skill to get up to the top. At least until you've worked out where all the statues are, and you can get it every time. The final stage. Princess Babs has been kidnapped, and yet somehow knows it's going to happen beforehand. If we apply the logic from the last level, this is either some very bizarre kidnap fantasy being played out by the bunnies, or this level and not the other 5 are actually them filming an episode. I really hope it's the latter, because the former is just a tad too weird for me to accept. So if you hadn't guessed, the theme for this stage is basically the Star Wars universe. The goal of the first screen is to find a key hidden in the top left of the map, to open the ship in the middle, and walk through some weird beam that can destroy walls and yet somehow leave you unharmed until you reach the edge of the map. Next we have, oh good, another auto-scroller. However, this time it's even worse, as you have to hide behind walls at specific points to stop yourself taking damage. Now, I wouldn't mind this normally, except for the fact it's almost impossible to make it to some of these walls, and it just makes it more of a pain to sit through, as you're more likely to die and have to keep doing it over and over again. Now, the game normally ends here if you're playing on beginner mode, so everything else is all new territory. The next screen, bizarrely, has a gimmick that is only used very briefly, and I think it's something that's underused in gaming in general. You have a switch to hit which reverses gravity. There's no point to it, as all you have to do here is keep changing gravity until this ball smashes through the ceiling and you can get through. But it would have been great to see some platforming puzzle involving it being used properly. Following this rather unusual detour, you're given 2 paths, easy and hard. Both lead to the same room, but naturally one of them is a bit easier than the other. You have to run up the wall and avoid the death icons and try to hit the go-go ones so you can make it to the top in one go. It's actually quite difficult to do, but we are at the end of the game, so it's sort of expected that the difficulty should be ramped up. After going through the last room of the game from left to right where not much happens, you enter the room with the final boss. And once again, the boss has an unusual strategy to being defeated. Basically, the key is to hit the laser cannon so it spins round and fires at him rather than you. This can be quite difficult to time, however, as you don't know when the cannon's going to fire. Keep doing it a few times and eventually he'll give up and you get the ending. The bonus stages. With the use of a password, you can access the bonus stages at any time. So here's what they are. Squash. You play squash, simple. Hit the ball 15 times for an extra life, hit a passing animal for a power-up, and marvel at the fact that Hampton just simply can't take his eyes off of your ball. I'm not the one to comment there. Maze. It's like Pac-Man, only it's not. Run around the maze. For each friend you free, you gain an extra life. If you're caught by anyone wandering around, it's over instantly. Simple enough, but definitely one of the harder bonuses. Bingo! It's simply bingo. Get a line, get a life. The amount of balls you get seems to vary from time to time. Sometimes I've had just 2 faces left, other times 3 or even 4. It seems completely random. Wait. If you get this one, it is just a waste of time. You have 5 characters to pick from, and each one's in a different weight class. Choose your 5 in any order, and then you're drawn against a randomly selected opponent. If your character is heavier, you gain an extra life. You can't get more than 4 lives here, and it's also highly possible you'll actually get nothing at all. Puzzle. Hampton wants to eat apples. That's actually surprising. But anyway, he will only follow the path that he is on, so move those tiles around to make another path that will eat all the apples. If he runs out of path or falls down a hole, it's game over. So that's Buster Bust Loose. It's not a long game, I finished it in about 2 hours, and that included filming all of the extras. Each stage had its own theme and gimmicks thrown in, as you can see, and it feels like a really solid platformer, despite the fact auto-scrolling takes over a quarter of the game's content. The controls are good. Any mistakes you make are your own, and you'll feel that when you make them. The difficulty does seem to be a bit all over the place, but possibly because they had different segments in each stage, catered for adults and children. Obviously the adult sections only being available in normal mode, and therefore are much harder. The bosses, as already stated, were all unique and didn't require just pounding away at to win. You actually had to think to find the correct method of winning the fights, and I'm not going to lie, some of them actually took me quite a few attempts to get through. It just goes to show what can happen when a reputable games company gets a hold of a licensed program for a game. It's a short game, so I kind of wish it went on for longer. But on the flip side, maybe if it had been longer, it'd feel more repetitive and less unique. The fact you can continue from any stage of a password, despite there being only 6 levels in the game, takes out quite a lot of challenge, and also the football stage seemed completely out of place and pointless. But what to rate it? I'm personally thinking I'll give it 7.5 out of 10. I'd rate it significantly higher if the game was longer, had a more consistent difficulty curve, and you actually had a reason for playing it through on the challenge difficulty. Despite bragging rights, of course, because really, once you've done it on normal, there's nothing else to see in the game. It's a bit misleading as well, especially if you've done the jump from children to normal, as I did from my childhood, and you're expecting something extra for all the hard work. But no, you just get the same ending screen again, with a bit less text on the screen, and you realise it's actually also the same as the title screen. And just if you're curious, here's the ending for the game. sexy faces on. I may end up laughing if I do this, so I need to be careful.
So it would be good for the outtake reel.
Yeah. I should probably put that game on the back. That's the one that's on the back in the other shot. We're really going overboard with the continuity, aren't we? Because we're the sort of people who'd notice.
We'll get letters. When?
We'll get a letter. When will Christopher realise that in one shot he had Donkey Kong Country 3 in the back of his UA Universal Expert Version adapter, and in another shot he had Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy Kong Quest in the back of his UA Universal Adapter Expert Version. That was a mouthful and a half.